Welcome everyone to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast, the podcast focused on leadership. The episode will begin shortly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the podcast.
Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Dr. John Bedker Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, John Bedker. Well, not much question what we need to talk about today. Certainly, the activity between Iran, Israel, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump, are at the forefront. There are so many things that we can learn, so many things that I think each of us should make sure our awareness is high about. I'm going to talk about today President Trump and his leadership on both Iran and Israel. Let me begin by reading from an article, sort of set the framework, and as current as possible. It's an article by Julian Borger from The Guardian. It was done just this morning, literally just a few hours ago. The title, Israel, the U.S., and Iran all claim to have won the war, but who has really gained? Okay. So here we go. Basically, she starts the article by saying, to the surprise of almost no one, all sides declared victory as they formally accepted Donald Trump's announcement of a ceasefire on Tuesday morning. But the long-term winners, if any, and losers will take some time to emerge. By midday in the Middle East, the dust had not even settled. More than 2 hours after the ceasefire was supposed to have started at 0500 GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, Israel said it had intercepted at least 2 missiles coming from Iran heading for the north of the country. Iran denied having launched anything, but Israel vowed devastating retaliation. Waking up to the news, a furious Donald Trump blamed both sides, but reserved particular wrath for Israel, telling it to bring its pilots home and warning that if they dropped their bombs, it would be a, quote, major violation, end quote. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was reported to be trying to calm the U.S. president down. It's politically damaging for Netanyahu to be on the wrong side of Trump, and the pressure on him will be intense to return to compliance with the ceasefire. For its part, Iran had couched the truth as something it had, quote, imposed on the enemy, end quote. An instantly suspect appraisal, given the very small number of missiles that pierced the enemy's defensive shield, that Iron Dome, and the very limited damage it managed to inflict. Even if Trump manages to get the ceasefire back on the rails, his whole claim overnight to have secured an enduring peace has been disproved with, and I'm quoting now, humiliating speed. I think the ceasefire is unlimited. It's going to go forever, Trump told NBC News on Monday night. He had predicted that Israel and Iran would never be shooting at each other again. That is a quote. The president's other sweeping assessment, that Iran's nuclear program had been, quote, obliterated, never to be rebuilt, has been echoed by Netanyahu, albeit a little less emphatically. Well, there's no question that Israel and U.S. bombers achieved a huge amount of demolition work. Satellite imagery has circulated showing Iranian and nuclear sites in ruins and craters in the ground where the underground facilities are presumed to be located. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has confirmed significant damage to above-ground and subterranean chambers at Iran's primary uranium enrichment plant in Natanz and at the better protected plant in Fordow, which had been built into a mountain. The IAEA's Director General, Rafael Grossi, pointed out that even if the U.S. bunker-busting bombs did not penetrate as far as the enrichment halls, they are expected to have caused very significant damage. Again, that's a quote, given the extreme vibration-sensitive nature of centrifuges. Okay, so a little bit there. Let's go on for just a moment about the assessments so then we can talk really specifically about leadership. The Director General, again, Rafael Grossi of the IAEA, made clear that the IAEA could no longer account for Iran's stockpile of 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60% purity. This highly enriched uranium, known as HEU, highly enriched uranium, is one of the crown jewels of the Iranian nuclear program. If further enriched to 90%, it would be enough for about 10 warheads. Before Israel's surprise attack, the IAEA had the material under remote surveillance in a storage site deep under the Isfahan complex. Since the attack, the agency has lost track of it. As the HEU can be stored and transported in containers the size of scuba tanks, they can easily be moved around the country in nondescript passenger cars. Iranian officials publicly suggested that the HEU hoard had been moved before the country came under attack. Okay, this article from The Guardian is really well documented, well researched. I've only read a small portion of it, but it really details a lot of things that raise questions from a leadership point of view. And here we go. Let's focus on that. Sometimes, I'll say sadly, but sometimes leaders succeed in spite of themselves. That may very well be the case with what we're seeing here today in President Trump. Let's hope. I think we all hope. We don't want nuclear proliferation. We really don't want Iran with multiple nuclear weapons. Yeah, that's clear. Some would say obvious. But how do you get to them not having them? Well, again, a couple of premises here. One, we hope, and I certainly encourage in this podcast regularly, that leaders should prevail because of themselves, because of their leadership core competencies. But oftentimes, and may very well be in this case, that President Trump may prevail in spite of himself. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's go to an axiom in leadership that I think is really the central thesis of today's podcast. And that axiom is this: leaders should be process-driven, not outcome-based. Say that again. Leaders should be process-driven, not outcome-based. Well, as I've read from The Guardian, and I think most people have seen in the news, social media, throughout, all of these events are jumbled into a relatively short time frame. And so many of the process-driven competencies that you would have expected were not present, because Trump was primarily trying to manage the outcome, the destination, Iran not having a nuclear weapon. Well, let's talk about and compare these two styles of leadership and why I am saying so clearly, I hope, and so emphatically that we as leaders should be process-driven and not outcome-based. And here we go. The process-driven approach emphasizes the how. Yeah. So, go back to that beginning management course. How do we plan, organize, direct, staff, and control our organization? Well, every one of those involves a number of processes. We often talk about things like methods, systems, and behaviors, okay? These are the things that lead to the desired results. So rather than managing an outcome, a leader would say, I want to really manage these processes. I want to manage them well. I want to adapt as necessary over time. And I want to regularly check that I am improving continuously my management of processes. Because by doing that, the likelihood of that outcome being what you want is significantly higher than just trying to manage an outcome alone. Okay, so that person that wants to say, no, President Trump in this case, I'm just going to manage the outcome, fails to recognize the important components of these processes. Those list I gave, plan, organize, direct, staff, control, and all of the nuances that emerge from each and every one of those. Because if you think about this game of geopolitics as a chess game and say, all right, if I move one chess piece from one position to another, okay, but what does that mean 3 or 4 moves from now? Understanding the processes and understanding how they contribute to the outcome allows one to consider beforehand what might happen 3 or 4 moves later. Okay. So let's talk about process-driven leadership. This focus on these steps, these strategies, actions, lead to a goal. There's an emphasis on consistency and efficiency. Robust processes, systems, lead to consistency. Leadership, folks, we love that. That's a good thing. Why? Leads to reduced errors, fewer screw-ups, right? Improved efficiency over time. Now, that word efficiency has come up recently, certainly with Trump and his very close ally, I guess now separated, Elon Musk, in a group called DOGE, that Department of Government Efficiency, what I'm just now talking about. Well, he metaphorically liked to associate himself with that chainsaw of just going in and ripping things without any idea, without any awareness of process, just managing an outcome. And how did that work out? Well, the amount of money saved at the end, certainly it's ongoing, has been relatively minuscule to the federal budget. But the havoc that it has raised, the inconsistency and the lack of efficiency has been blatant. So, the process-driven person, again, focuses on consistency and efficiency. Also on adaptability and learning. So when you focus again on process, you get to see those areas, those processes where you can adapt as needed, as events change. A new day. What in management speak we call continuous improvement, right? Which is what you want, continuous improvement. What about accountability and ownership? Well, clear processes make it easier to assign responsibility. Again, you have a team, you have a collective, you have those that you serve as the prime leader. And they are expert in their area. They are absolutely aware of their chess piece on the board and what its movement would imply for the larger game. Also, this builds this strong foundation where leaders have a sustainable path to achieving their goal because we have processes in place that we are measuring, that we're observing, we're continuously improving. And with that, as modifications are necessary, they are much more easily implemented and knowingly so. So that's important. What about that outcome-based person? Again, focused on the outcome, that destination. So you could get that short-term gain, and that may very well be what's happened here with both Iran and Israel. We could have a victory. We could have a plus. Things could work out well. Let's not deny that. And that could be a great, great thing. But again, it's a pretty clear example of succeeding in spite of yourself rather than because. Because what happens when you try to just manage that outcome? You set yourself up for long-term risks. Back to that chessboard. 3 or 4 moves from now, you may find out that, oh my goodness, what have I done? When I moved that piece way back when, 3 or 4 moves ago, I did not know that I was headed to a place that I do not want to be. Okay, a bad place. And again, this human element of not understanding who these people are. Certainly in the case of Iran and Israel, we're talking about Jewish people and Islamic people. Very, very different. And we need to appreciate and value that and put that into the equation to manage. So, emphasizing process. Where is it most beneficial? Where is it most efficient? Well, the literature on this seems quite clear. In complex projects, and holy cow, would we not say that the Iran, Israel, U.S. situation we're all reading about today is not a very complex project. Also, in situations that require consistency, precision. Well, we certainly had precision bombing. But for instance, the bomb damage assessment, the BDA, we're unable to do that. We certainly will have satellite imagery, but we really literally need to be on site. So that human intelligence is probably not readily available. And even so, as the IAEA Inspector General has made clear, that enriched uranium may very well have been moved beforehand and may not even be present currently at the site. So, here we are in a situation where absolutely world order is at stake. And what will happen? Who will side with Iran? Who will side with Israel? Who will support the president? He's in the NATO meeting as we speak, and I record this episode. Again, there are multiple chess pieces to be done prospectively as this geopolitical chess game proceeds. A few of the scientists in Iran were killed. But it takes thousands, literally thousands, of nuclear physicists and nuclear engineers. And where are they? And where will they be tomorrow? Or next week or next year? Will some go to Russia? Will Russia enable them to continue their work, develop a weapon, and literally bring it back? Or will they go to another country, Saudi Arabia, who might say, wow, we definitely need a weapon. We definitely need a weapon. Well, who knows? All these things are conjecture, but they are the process-driven pieces to think through and to think about, to prepare for tomorrow. So the case is this. Did President Trump achieve success in spite of himself? Perhaps. And if so, terrific. Or was he playing checkers when the game is really chess? That he was not process-driven. Rather, he was outcome-based. Well, folks, going forward, we're going to learn more about this. But for each and every one of us as leaders, I want to make the case, as many of you well know, the encouragement, certainly the absolute thrust of this podcast is for leaders to be process-driven and not outcome-based. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Dr. John Bedker's Leadership Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please tell your friends, and, of course, please follow our podcast and subscribe. Thank you again for tuning in.